good afternoon, good evening, I don't know. My English is not the best, and I hope you don't laugh about my mistakes, but I make things understandable. For me, it's a difference between sound engineer and Tonmeister. I don't know whether this is the same in England, in Britain. In Germany, one is specialized to be a Tonmeister. That means we are studying like the conductors, like the composers, with a main point to the musical subjects. And in the radio we are working like this. You can imagine I have the score, and in front of me is a sound engineer sitting at the console. I'm not handling the console. I'm only looking for the score and discussing with the conductors and musicians whether it's right or it's good and it's fine, and we take it or we have to repeat. This for the first point. And composing, you can imagine if you have the chance to have a job at the radio station, for me it was I don't know, in German I would say ein Sechser im Lotto. That means the best you can win. It's very, very difficult to get a job, and all over the time I was employed by the Southwest Radio. There were only three women in all the radio stations in Germany. It was the beginning of a new era, I hope. Era? Era. Yes. But let's begin. And I wanted to begin with something to listen, a work for string quintet called Nachklang Padjelanta. You see the beginning of the score there. Nachklang is translated perhaps sounding remembrance, in this case of a hiking trail in northern Sweden called Padjelantaleden. The string quintet is written for 2 violins, an alto, a cello, and a double bass. It was performed by the excellent musicians of the Ensemble Resonanz, a very famous ensemble specialized in contemporary music in Hamburg, where we recorded the piece in February last year, and it will be published on my CD and released in April this year. The score you can see, this is only a section, the beginning. Perhaps, Annie, you can scroll a little bit to the next page. Yes, perfect. And I let it, you can read it, I let it there. Before explaining this, let's listen to the music. So this was the longest piece I'm giving you today. And I can imagine, I heard you were more dealing with computers and sound arts than with compositions with normal instruments. But I wanted to begin with this because I can explain you something that's important for my composing and thinking. I give you a little bit information to the background of the piece. The title was Hörlandschaften or Nachklang. I summarize a lot of my works under the title of Hörlandschaften. I can translate this perhaps with listened landscapes. Landschaft is landscape and Hören is the auditive impetus to landscapes. Hiking for days through the national park in Lapland, northern Sweden, at the Arctic Circle sets many inner processes in motion. I try to feel, to perceive, to absorb the landscape, looking, hearing, tasting, observing. And at the same time, this hike serves to recover body and mind through the distance gained from everyday's life. There's not even reception for telephone or, not to mention, for internet. I listen to the landscape and what it sounds like, its tones, its sounds, its structures and relations. They take shape in my mind, getting musical form and changing their form in sounds or likewise in words, while I am walking step by step, perception and modification through myself, my mind, through the environment, its impressions, through our efforts, the fatigue in the evening, besides mostly a good feeling, lassitude. The result is Nachklang. Of course, after weeks of working on those impressions and ideas and after the process of composing, Nachklang is the sounding memory of landscape and our being therein. A piece for string quartet plus double bass, if you just heard. Let's think of the term landscape. The philosopher and sociologist Georg Simmel explained more than 100 years ago, landscape is an achievement of our perception and our consciousness. By looking at or listening to, we only perceive a section out of the endless context of nature, of the environment. We outline and limit this section arbitrarily according to our ideas, to our actual mood. And so limited is consequently our field of vision, respectively of our hearing. What you see, what you hear, is only a restricted part of a whole. And so are its components, reduced to what you are actually able and willing to perceive. What's your mood like? That's a crucial insight. We believe it's an entire whole and complete, but it is not. That's the basic important insight. Out of this reduced perception, we create an image and we call it landscape, a new unity out of the sections and parts we look at and unite arbitrarily. And we reject the chimney at the right corner to belong to our landscape, just as the buzzing of the permanent traffic at the foot of the hill where we are sitting. We create our landscape out of the various components we perceive. We form a new entity, and then we assign our own meaning, our meaning, to this conglomerated pseudo whole. We say a landscape has a mood, and thus we refer exactly to the peculiar spiritual process that creates a landscape out of all this. This is a quotation of Georg Simmel. We create this, our landscape, out of our mind. We look at the country, enjoy the sight of green meadows, mild hills, rugged mountains, and block out what for us doesn't fit into the picture. The mentioned factory chimney, for example, or the noisy traffic beneath. What we call a landscape is therefore the result of the process of our perception, colored, modified, and dominated by our mood as well as our imagination. Applied to creativity, this process culminates in artworks, and this namely in all art genres, as landscape painting and nature photography, as a literary landscape description or in poem form, and in our case, musically, as a composition or a sound installation. My transformation of a certain landscape I have lived into sounds, into a musical composition, you have just heard by Nachklang, the sounding remembrance of the Padja-Landerleden. For my transformations or reference of a landscape, I have chosen the term Hörlandschaft. The best translation may be a listened landscape, as an auditive analogy to the term Landschaft, its landscape, which normally is defined as an optical impression. The term Hörlandschaft can mean describing and recreating a landscape musically, or listening to the sounds from a landscape and composing your own musical landscape from the optical as from the auditive perception. And of course, the other way, to imagine a landscape from music while listening to a composition. Next point. Another theme important to understand my way of composing is Farben. It means colors, sound colors, timbres. That's a determinating parameter of my composing. Already in the last piece, I gave you these parameters, and they are fundamental all over. For instance, and for an optical pendant, this is only the surface of water. That's all. But you can see how subtle the details are, how many colors and movements and structures are included in this, and perhaps it helps you to understand to concentrate of the same things in the music, in my music. If you remember, in the last piece, Padja-Landerleden, there were very little details in the forming of a sound of a complex, only with very few pitches and variations of the chords playing there. Regarding to timbres, they can found in various playing techniques of the instruments, but also dynamics, subtly defined types of vibrato, from, for instance, non-vibrato to a very intense and oscillating vibrato, micro-intervals and, in general, intervals have a color, they have a timbre. It's not meant the feeling you have if you if you listen to a third, it seems to us harmonic. And perhaps you can react and say, oh, it's very reposing, or you can say it's dull. I don't want to listen this. But a part of this, you have a special color. Of course, it depends on the overtones of the instruments you use to let them play a third or a little second. Take a look at the playing instructions. Now we need the legend of Padilanta. In the preface or legend to my composition, we just heard. Here you see a lot of instructions for the players, how to realize pitches. I've tried to translate this in English, but I'm not very sure that's all correct. You can see there is a description of the layers. It's a point I discuss it later on. But you see there the grades of vibrato, for instance. There you can see this. They have to not only to make ba, that they also have to play ba, but till a point molto vibrato ba, like this. And I think you heard. Annie, please give the score once more. And next page, please. And okay, you can see here. This is a sign to begin with a very big vibrato and then let it fade out, for instance. And on the other hand, so you see this is a vibrato, this is a glissando here. This means was heißt erniedrigen oder erhöhen? To make a little bit higher the pitch, only a quarter tone, not a half tone. Ascent, yes, thank you. And things like this. The next point is, there is written letter B, Farbe, color 3. It's a layer 3. If you go back to the first page, please, then you can see there is a color 1 and color 2. And I don't know whether you remember or not, you can differentiate the complexes, the layers, I think, very exactly. Let's go on. What comes next? Landscape photo, yes. That's only an illustration that you have an idea. Yeah. Why I'm talking about hills and a buzzing traffic. You can here is a hill. This is a photo of this landscape there in northern Sweden. Okay. An excerpt from another work makes my thoughts of the Hörlandschaft, the listened landscape, even clearer again, and likewise the idea of timbres. Schabert was born from the impression of an interior hike, also in the national park in northern Sweden. Schabert is a word of the Sami language for lake. Sami is how the inhabitants of this region in northern Sweden call themselves. The Swedes baptize them Lappen, Lapland. I don't know the term in the name in English. My composition is influenced by a wonderful little lake on the edge of the national park. You find the patterns of the waves perhaps you can give the score of Sagat, of the patterns of the waves, of the moving water, in different variants from calm to stormy, the colors of the water from bright blue to dark gray, the wind, the leaves and trees surrounding the lake, the relaxation, the composure sitting at the lakeside after days of arduous walk. For my composition, I chose the combination of two flutes. You can see the abbreviations. The two flutes are a normal one and a recorder. Because of the special colors of the two instruments, at the same time similar and strange. There are also two clarinets, a normal and a bass clarinet, an oboe and a bassoon. Over a long section, they all are performing the same pitch, only the colors are changing. The interferences and the rhythmical repetitions are likewise generating colors. A lot of colors and of timbres. Let's listen to the piece. It's 4 minutes and a little bit. Und the Legend können wir spielen lassen. Oh no, it's fine. Stop once more. Let's begin once more. For me, it's a difficulty. In concert, there's very much dynamic difference. The volume is very loud and very, very low. And I think it's difficult to realize this here only by loudspeakers. Therefore, I beg you to begin once more, and perhaps you concentrate on the differences. We begin once more, please. I thought I had to fade out, but it isn't. Excuse me. Let's return to the legend once for a moment. Yeah, you can see there are multiphonics expelling air as long as breath lasts, and so on. It's also like in the first piece I gave you. It's you can see the colors, the timbres. I tried to realize with the instrumentalist, and we had to practice each part before combining and performing the whole piece. Okay, then I chose the image of Gerhard Richter for giving you an optical pendant to my idea of landscapes and the endless variety of colors. I want to remember you of a series of images of Gerhard Richter in the Tate Modern here in London. I admire them exorbitantly. Big as a wall, they are hanging on and modifying only the color gray. The picture is, I took a photo of a postcard. It's not the original thing. But if you want, this is in the Tate Modern, and they are very high. They are from the ceiling to the floor. And they are gray, not as blue as mine here. But to have an idea, I think it's a very fine example, because in the first moment, people often think, oh, it's only gray, it's only blue, or something like this. And we have to develop the feeling and the subtle perceiving of all the little details. That's, for me, it's interesting to make something very loud and very different, maybe interesting sometimes. But in the end, I think this is more enduring, if you can say it like this. Okay. Next point for me and my composing is timbres and material. An analogous approach to timbres I use also in my acousmatic works. Hereby, I want to focus your attention to a very essential and basic question. Let's reflect and discuss the fundamental decision: what can be possible sounds for making music? What is suitable as a material for compositions? Formally, it seems to be clear. At the music university, we learned music that's by definition composed for and performed by the standardized classical instruments. But this conventional view had been asked again and again, at least since the 1950s, by John Cage, Helmut Lachenmann, the French composers of the concrete music, and many others. Perhaps you remember, or you heard, the trio basso of Lamont de Young. I have recorded this at the Donaueschinger Musiktage. This is a very famous German festival for contemporary music. And there we had to record this trio basso. It's written for alto, cello, and double bass. It's lasting about, I don't know, half an hour or so. And it's only it's only made out of the wind sounds in a hut where Lamont de Young lived in his childhood. And this is very difficult to play for the musicians, because you have to take the bow like this. 3 minutes for going down and 3 minutes for going up. You have to be very tranquil and calm to that you are at least able to perform this. Or the other point, parts of radio emissions included in works of John Coach, I think you know this. Quietness, silence, and total absence of sounds. Or the famous lectures of John Cage, who led his audience around the campus and told them to listen only to all the environmental sounds from birds to traffic. If anybody believes musical compositions are to be made exclusively with instrumental sounds or alternatively synthetical sounds made by electronics and constructed in analogy to and after the model of normal instrumental sounds, for me, it's an empty repetition of what has been heard over and over, uninteresting and a little bit dull. I'll give you an example. Yesterday we came by Eurostar here to London, and at a certain point I noticed that the train was singing. It was a little melody with glissandos of micro intervals and from, how to say in English, chamber tone and A for 442 hertz or this like this. And it was only changing sound. This was all, much slower than I made it. And there was a second line that was the wheels of the train, boom, 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 boom. You know this. And I thought, oh, it's fine. This is a line for a woodwind or two woodwinds. You can change it. And then you add a line of basses. For instance, double basses or great gran casa. I don't know in English, excuse, and playing batuto, bum 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 bum, and you can play with this rhythm. You can make another rhythm. You can let it develop, and so on. And so you can find music in a very everyday environment, and at once you are sitting there and you think, oh, this is a very disturbing traffic sound, or it's the beginning of a music. I want to concentrate your view that the material we use is not only instruments, it's not only singing, it's not only doing synthetical sounds by composing, that we can find them all around us. That has another point of view. Perhaps we have the time and we can speak about this later on. I have a different intention and approach. I myself insist on considering every sound or noise that can be perceived in our acoustic environment as a possible sound and material from which to create musical compositions. I'll give you a statement here that summarizes my point of view. You have the, yes, thank you. I made this for my website. My art, everything that surrounds us acoustically is sound. The rustling of leaves, rolling thunder, birds, and croaking frogs, squeaking glass, squeaking brakes, breaking glass, a lid that falls to the floor, but as much a violin tone, a child's voice, a soprano coloratura, bars of a symphony orchestra, a drum beat, an oboe melody. Music can be formed from sound. That's called composing. You can compose for traditional instruments and ensembles with pen on paper. Then the computer can also be an instrument. I collect and record sounds, stretch and shorten them, split them into slices, dismember, transpose, modify, edit and reassemble them. This is how scores are created, or even digital sound works, acousmatic compositions, sound installations. Here I wanted to give you an example, but we noticed just before the lecture that it wasn't complete. And therefore before we take a little break, I give you only this the desktop photo of Updraft and the sounds I used to make this. Yeah. Usually I work with the same software we used in the radio station for the post-production of classical recordings. I don't know whether you know Sequoia. It's a tool which gives me all the possibilities to modify a sound. And if you perhaps could give us Glasstroken and Struck. As I said, I can't give you the whole thing, but I give you the sounds I used. Strong. Yeah, of course. I think it's not difficult to identify. It was a wine glass, and you can make sounds with a wet finger, and the other was to struck it. Yes, that's that. Are you take a break or not? We can also continue. For me, it's okay. We want to continue. Perhaps we have time that I can give you a better example of an acousmatic work afterwards. Yes, it's okay. I think it's okay. Okay. Perhaps you can see, this is a photo of the desktop of the whole acousmatic work. And here you can see my conception was for 4 loudspeakers. And here you can see in an optical way that there are courses and densifications and so on. And with this, I want to discuss another point. This is space and ambience. That's space and ambience are 2 parameters. I like them very much. I think that depends also on my working as a Tonmeister. When you have to do a recording of an orchestra or an ensemble, you have to reflect the positions of the instruments, the interdependence, the relations between the instruments, that it becomes an entire ensemble, sounding ensemble, and of course all the other things that the dynamic is correct and the timbre of the instruments. But the thing of the space, the ambience, is a speciality. I have the impression that most of musicians don't think about this point. Performing instrumentalist musicians, they go on the stage and they say, oh, it's a dry acoustic, or there are some reverberations and it's very, very wet acoustic, of course, and they change their performing, the tempo, for instance, a little bit regarding to the acoustic, but to form an ambience, to form an acoustical space, that's not the normal thinking of musicians. I want to give you 3 points to the subject of space, and we can discuss the spatial disposition of compositions, placing instruments all over a hall, at the stage, and even in the region of the audience. I remind you of some of the earliest examples, the polychoral music of the late Renaissance in Venice, the Gabrieli composers, or Vivaldi, who spread parts of the orchestra to distant places in the vast church. San Marco is a very vast and big church, and Vivaldi used to dispose some musicians in the other end of the cathedral, and so you have a natural effect of echoing. It's very simple. You have to reflect and to deal with this your own if you want. Next point. We can discuss music filling an entire space with sound. Think of the Gregorian chorals of Hildegard from Bingen, expanding and filling and rising up in the cathedral. I made a work, Arachne. Arachne is spider. But it's an ancient Greek goddess of spiders. I wrote a piece for 4 musicians placed in distant corners of the performing hall. The 4 of them had to weave a sound network through the hall. Here you have both aspects, the dispositions of the musicians and this making a sound all around or through a room, a hall, a space. I don't have an example of this music. We made a recording, but I don't like it. And we can discuss also music creating virtual spaces, a space inside the concert hall. An excellent example is, do you know Luigi Nono's works? His opus summum, his last big, great work is Prometeo, tragedy of listening, tragedia dell'ascolto. And there is a movement called Tre Voci B, 3 voices. And in this movement, Nono forms through virtual spaces, and you are sitting in the concert hall, and in the first moment you think, oh, that's a big space surrounding me, and the next moment you think it's a very narrow space, and so on. This is not the point to go further on with this, but and you have to at least you have to for loudspeakers for this. But if you're interested, it's very worth occupying this with Nono's compositions. But here I want to concentrate on to lead your view to a third point, a third aspect. This is spatial thinking inside while composing. That's my main point to the subject ambience and space. While creating art, for us composing, your mind can form the works by thinking linear or thinking spatially, geometrically. Thinking linear reminds of talks, of novels. Mostly you have a melody and a harmonic succession. There's a sort of story and it has a compelling succession in time. You can't negate a mandatory sequence, how one tone or motive or period has to follow on the preceding and has itself to be followed by a next one. A linear, melodic, harmonic sequence in time, a sound speech. Klangrede is the German term, and it was in the 80s. It was a famous thing for the music of the early Baroque or Renaissance. But on the other hand, you can also form musical works by a spatial thinking. Normally, I myself begin likewise with a geometrical or spatial vision, or of a sound or a noise, or merely a spatial idea. An acoustical image, initially self-sufficient, then perhaps with ingredients, but without a development. You can imagine, roughly spoken, sounding sculpture blocks. I don't invent a series of sounds and tunes, but contrarily, I imagine a sound. And then I form it into a sound block or a sort of plane. Its extensions are spatially thought. I hope my term is sufficiently understandable and clear. And sound block is a complex, self-sufficient sort of a sounding sculpture. And it can in itself be varying, moving inside, modified. It can include in itself extensions or contractions, movements or structures, even processes. Let's have a look to another look to the score of Padjelanta, the first piece you heard. There you can see, this is not a development. It's a first block, then a second block, and then there is something very different. This is in a line. It has to do with perhaps if you need a parallel idea, it's like the little noises of insects or something like this. It's a little bit varying in itself, but there's, as I said, there's no development. I show you another score. Now we need interspaces, Zwischenräume. This is a score, third page, please. Yeah, there it is. Here you can see it's for a string orchestra. And you see there is, again, a block in the beginning, a little bit with a duplication, but it's, in principle, in general, it's the same pitches. And then you have a line, a link like this. Do we have another page of the score? Yes. Then after a while, there is repeated the first block. And you have the blocks and you have lines. This is what I think. It's not linearly thought. It's thought like sculptures, like yes, it's also an optical intuition, I think, perhaps. Okay, So I want to give you another example. It's called Zeitenlöcher, time gaps. Yeah, Zeitenlöcher. We take the audio. But first I say something. I wanted to say, can you take the legend of Zeitenlöcher? This is, I translate Zeitenlöcher as time gaps. It's an homage to Ursula Mamlock, a Jewish German composer, exiled in 1939 and returned to Berlin for her old age. And it's likewise an homage to Cassandra as portrayed by Christa Wolf. Text fragments from Christa Wolf. She is an author of the German author. She died some years ago. And she wrote a novel called Cassandra. Therefore, out of this novel, I took some quotations and also a quotation from Annie Arnaud, the French writer. But you will not have pronounced this text understandable in my composition. Most of the time I use the vowels with regard to their formants. It is the thereby generated timbres. The pitches are taken from a 12-tone series from Ursula Mamlock's piano piece In Top of a Hill. But the linearity of the 12-tone series, I have transformed them into a series of sound sculptures of sections. The sequence of these sections is principally variable. Each section is built over one or two pitches of the Mamlock 12-tone series. The first, for instance, uses the pitches A and E flat, the second F descending to E, the third a slightly modified G sharp, and so it continues. Soprano and bassoon characterize the sections. These sound complexes with changing colors. The alto forms the connecting, the constant link between the two other instruments. These sections are autonomous and self-reliant. So principally the order of the sections is modifiable and changeable. The performers can begin with the first section and continue with number 2, 3, 4 as notated, but they could also begin with the fifth section, then go to number 7, 2, 8, just like they want. And so they can construct their own series, a really own interpretation of my composition. Thereby, I described you the construction, or perhaps better, the structure of the piece. But naturally, the timbres and colors chosen for the particular section are also filled with meaning. I express my feelings, my emotions, corresponding to the text fragments by musical means. My idea of the philosophical and political content of Christa Wolf's novel, which is of course highly meaningful. They become sounding in my music. Likewise, the little phrase from Annie Arnaud, un souffle pluvieux du temps, a rainy breath of the time. Zeitenlöcher, that signifies time gaps. We live in times of crisis, of upheaval. War, violence, corruption, autocracies are rampant. Arduous achievements for human rights, for women's rights, are questioned and have to give way to renewed misogyny, xenophobia, nationalism. What we, my generation, are living, what we all have lived in the past decades is a gift of a hole, of a gap in time in history, at least in Europe. Human rights, women's emancipation, prosperity for the many of the population, and peace made progress. A time hole, a historical gap in which we were allowed to live freedom and self-realization. And since we have this new president in America, I think we have to struggle that this gap is a little bit, is going on, that we have to fight for our rights and the emancipation. But this is another point, not for the lecture here. And now we can listen to Zeitenlöcher. It's about 10 minutes.
ins Meer tauchen.
was ausblenden, dann kann ich noch was anderes sagen. I think it's better because I want to say a last point. Perceiving as precondition for creating art and its political impacts. That's for me. It's a very, very important point. There's a lot of words for our acoustic sensitivity. I found in the dictionary to hear, to hark, to listen, to eavesdrop, to hearken. You can surely continue the row. A subtle auditive perception is a precondition for all my activities and should be for all musicians, especially composers. My conception of what can be used as material for musical creations and the kind I'm working with coincides with and leads us to the theme absolutely essential, not only for me, but in general, perceiving. Perceiving is a precondition towards knowledge, for an exact method of view, of approach to everything, beings, objects, situations. And only if we perceive and regard the elements of our environment, we will respect them, we will estimate them, we will strive for protecting them. A new, increased listening attention in our everyday environment would be an important step towards environmental protection, climate protection, and humanity. Moreover, perceiving leads us to an elaborate collection of abilities of our own, of expressing ourselves. Expressing our wishes, requests, concerns, desires, wants, and so on, in a precise and concrete way. And this is the precondition of emancipation and social participation. And in this way, exact, sensible perceiving helps to emancipation, to our emancipation. And so music gets even some social and political effects. Yes, I had a last example, and you can say it's too much. I give you the dying apple tree. It's 4 minutes, and that's the end of my lecture. Pardon?
Is there a score?
No, there's no score. It's a cosmetic work. At first, I explain a little bit. An apple tree is cut off. It was an old tree, not longer fruiting, no leaves, no blossoms. Merely some insects liked it as a temporary home. This tree stood very near to the window of my studio, only a few meters. One day, there was a man coming with a big power saw to cut the tree. So I took my little digital recorder and held it out of the window. I recorded the singing of the saw and the cracking of the branches and the trunk falling. People must have thought this woman is a little bit silly. My idea was to tell the story of that tree in order to remind people of the value of apple trees, if you want, of all trees, of nature generally, and how horrible the wounding of nature sounds. On the other hand, I wanted to have the human stake presented in my little sound description. And so I looked for some typical human sounds, musically spoken. In effect, I chose some sounds of a bassoon I had recorded once with a friend of mine. The end of the story is, no, I don't You can listen. I don't say it. Okay. This is the end of the story. A slammed door, symbol for the kind, how humans are dealing with nature, our approach to nature, our exploitation, using its advantages, its fruits, the wood, and so on. And after consuming or often wasting, we don't think any more of the case. We cook the marmalade with the apples, we construct a chair of the wood or whatever, we burn the wooden billets in the chimney, and good is finished. This is the story of the dying apple tree, and I think you could imagine the whole story and the whole thing and the noises I recorded to make this. Thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you so much, Dorothee. That was a really wonderful lecture. Thank you for kind of inviting us into your works and your process. And yeah, so fascinating to be able to get to hear them alongside the stories. And yeah, also how your work connects with kind of like political and social issues was really fascinating to hear too. So thank you so much. We have some time for questions. Maybe everyone needs a little moment to... Great.
Hi, thank you for speaking. It's been really interesting. I was thinking with your sound blocks, I saw something that I feel like I've been looking for a while in terms of in new ways of presenting notation. Yeah. I was wondering if you've been applying that, or if you've ever applied it to working with non-musicians or musicians who maybe can't sight read and things like that. It just seems like a really useful tool for that kind of thing.
Excuse me, it's very...
Sorry, it's also my voice.
It's easier to write a lecture in England and than to understand. And ja, das habe ich verstanden.
Ob Sie Erfahrung haben, das für Musiker, die keine Partitur lesen können.
Yes, I understand. This is a kind of score, I think, too. And perhaps, please, can you give the other score, the other desktop photo from... Was hatten wir von Updraft? I wanted to show you something. The colors don't have any meaning. It's only varied or not. But yes, it's very fine, thank you. Here I made, there's a second one, except of this desktop. Also Boston Bahn. You can, because it's here, it's a little bit difficult to see this. You see, it's this yeah, it's fine. This is the beginning of the thing, and there you can see all the things of the score if you want. You can see the duration of the samples. You can see the volume, and so and. If we could go in, I can't because I don't have my laptop with me, then you could see that there is always the same particle, and it's only doubled and third one and so on. And this is, I have written Bahn and Rumpeln. This means the train, what I said of the Eurostar, it's the dum, the dum, the dum, the dum. Yes, we have the beginning of this. Perhaps we can give it, then it's a little bit better to understand. Only the very beginning of Boston Rail. You know, this is the people said it's the eldest metropolitan station in Boston in USA, and it's very impressioning acoustically. Is this? It was a crescendo show. That's it. And to make a score is, is only one way to fix the ideas you have. This is the other way. And perhaps you know, when I studied in Berlin, at the same university besides as Annie, and this was a period where many composers made graphic composition, graphic scores. And for this I could make only this, for instance. Or today we don't have the time, but I tried to translate images of Paul Klee. You know Paul Klee, I think. He is a famous painter of the... Yeah. Perhaps when I pronounce it unusual, you have to say. And I tried to make correspondence musically to this. It's nearby because Paul Klee was a very good and able and brave violinist. He played classical music and he painted. And therefore, if you have this, did I do the, no, I didn't do. There is a painting, it's only a big Leinwand, a big linen. Canvas, yes. And it has a white ground, but you see that this white ground is not uniform, that it have a structure, it had little variations inside. And there is only a red circle and a black circle, that's all. And you have a very interesting correspondence. It's a little bit like the picture of Gerhard Richter. There's very few things you elaborated, but if you look concentrated and you look with a great sensitivity, then you see all the little details, all the little modifications. This is also a form of a score, if you want. Why not? The only thing is, people have to understand. If musicians shall perform, you have to show your own ideas, your musical ideas, in a form that other people can listen. That's all. Can read. Sorry, this was fine. so. Okay.
Yeah, thanks so much. That's really useful.
Any more questions? Any online? Okay, maybe I'll go to the online one. Hi, Daniel. So, Daniel Freeman on our online chat says, "Thank you for your vivid descriptions of your practice. What was the mood you were capturing in the first two Hörlandschaften pieces,
yes.
please? I think the pieces are beautiful, but perhaps some walkers might imagine or want music which is more gentle, more pastoral, more soothing. What drew you to the more obtuse sounds?"
But that's not my intention to make music. This is gentle, or you can feel. Oh, that's a very principal question. Do we make music to amuse people, that they can repose and have a? In French, it's. Oh, I can take this, of course. Excuse. They have a divertissement, or do we make music to express ourselves, or do we make music to tell people who are listening to my music, to tell them, to explain them something? The last example, the dying apple tree, is clearly the last point. This was This was a sort of festival we made in Karlsruhe. There's an association of women artists, and we made a series of concerts and performances, and also lectures and so on, under the title of for protecting climate and hindering climate change. It was supported by the town, by the city of Karlsruhe, and there we had a special place to listen to statements to the subject climate. This was, we called it Hörstuhl. It was a chair. You could sit on it. It was a little bit designed with a sort of green grass and flowers and so on. And you could sit there and take a headphone and listen to the statements of about 12 artists. And therefore, the time was restricted. I made this apple tree thing with 5 minutes, with 4 minutes, and other things. And that's very clear. That was our intention was to talk with other people, to speak to people not dealing and occupying so often as us with climate questions. This is very clear. My mood in the first piece, Padjelanderleden, we walked, I think, for 10 or 12 days. You can imagine you are doing walks from one hut of the other. There are tourist huts, and they were fine. You find all the things you need there in the evening. It's very easy and very fine. But walking in this region is harder than walking in the plain here in Middle Europe. When you are doing 16 kilometers a day, then you are really tired in the evening, and you have to take all the things you need with you. You have a backpack, thanks, with your food, your clothes, and all the things. The water is not necessary. There's enough. And what's the mood if you are doing such a walk? For me, it was mainly the distance for everyday's life. As I said, you have no telephone, you have no internet, you are with some other people, you are not alone, you're not lonesome there, but you are, how to say, I say it in German, perhaps Annie can give, zurückgeworfen auf sich selbst.
Zurückgeworfen.
Thrown
back into yourself?
Thrown back to yourself. There's nothing between, and nothing that can distract your concentration, but you're with you. And what people are thinking and feeling in this situation is, of course, it's very different. For me, it was reposing and thinking over what I am doing. It was the years of my job at the radio. There were very very big effort. This is if you have to do recordings with a big orchestra, and you are the one conducting the thing, the recording. And they are not often very willing to listen to my commands. And there's a conductor, and he is jealous of what I am doing, and his position in front of the orchestra. That's not very easy. It's sometimes very arduous, like this. Do you have another question? No.
Yeah, here.
Hi, thank you for the lecture. I just wonder, what's the relationship between you and the instrument player? Is there spaces between the scores and their way of playing, or you take time to speak with them or modify their way of thinking when they play your scores?
It's a development. In the beginning, Sagat, the thing for the woodwinds, was one of my first pieces I could record with professionals. And therefore, I visited each of the, every musician, and we looked to the part he has to play or she had to play, and they gave me very very fine commands. So you have to learn very much on the instruments. The other point is I have worked with a symphony orchestra as a Tonmeister, and this, I always say, this was better than any lesson at the university. If you, yes, for instance, you have to understand that there are, how's the word in German? I don't know. If you have a clarinet, then there are parts of the whole pitch ambience instrument can play, and it's very difficult. If you let a normal clarinet play a pitch like ba, then it's sounding normal. If you give the same pitch to a soprano clarinet, it's a very low tone, a low pitch for this instrument, and it's sounding, it's had to have a totally different color. So for the first piece, I did this. I discussed this very exactly with the instrumentalists, and this was a help for further compositions. Today, it's like, for instance, Seitenlöcher for the soprano, the alto, the bassoon. It wasn't necessary. I gave it to the soprano, and she said, "Oh, I don't need any explanation. It's there's everything is written. What's the problem?" But there are instruments I know better, and others I don't know. In the moment I make something for three bass woodwinds, a clarinet, a recorder, a bassoon, and there are some problems of multiphonics or what's possible as volume, as changing of colors in this register, we say. Register, you can say it's like this? Yes. Of the instruments. And this I want to control with the musicians once more. It's like this. And therefore things there are of course they are easier. You are alone with your computer and you can form them. No? You listen to the saw in the dying apple tree is stretched and transposed and so on. And you can try it and you can say, oh no, I don't like it, and make a new one. And with instruments in the concerts, it's not possible. You have to control it before.
Thank you.
Have you the possibility, you students here, the possibility to work with musicians, with instruments?
Not so much on this course. Independently, I think some students pursue that, but there's no music studies as such, because it's an art university. So it's mainly students working at the computer on a digital audio workstation. We can record instruments, and we have music production studios. It's a little bit more pop music oriented or contemporary, but we don't have like a load of instrumentalists here, no. Mm-hmm.
Hi, thank you so much. Yeah, it was really, really interesting and inspiring. Yeah, I think my question is basically about your personal, because you spoke about different, I guess, purposes of artwork that you can make. That either it is, I guess, for someone to listen and to understand, or maybe it's self-expression, or whatever the kind of, I guess, purpose you can assign to it. So I'm curious about your purpose and I guess your approach to creative act and creativity, and where does the listener, like, are your pieces made with, I guess, with the intention of the listener to be able to understand them, or do you not care about that so much, and do you do it mostly as a form of kind of creative act for yourself, or as to fulfilling your vision and your ability to appreciate, or is it, do you consider accessibility of your work as well, and maybe also slight question of kind of this classical music narrative of sort of prestige and sort of elite and stuff like that. No, I'm just curious, like, what's the sort of relationship, your relationship to that, and yeah, just curious.
I'm of course influenced by I have made a classical study. This is the first point. Do you know the name of Fanny Hensel? Is a sister of Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy. Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy died in, I think, 80-20s in this year or 30s. And I began with my piano lessons when I was about 9 or 10 years old. And my piano teacher was a granddaughter of this famous composers. And so you are influenced, it's normal. And from the beginning, she gave me only the literature of the time. For instance, I played a piano piece of Robert Schumann, and then she said, oh, you have to read this romantic author, the writer, Etia Hoffmann, or like this. And to see the things together, to combine them, I think this is a point that's very influencing me from the beginning. The next point is first I have studied, as Annie told you, history and some other subjects, because when I finished school, I saw with a piano, I'm not good enough to be a pianist, to piano player, a professional piano player, and only to be a piano teacher. No, I didn't want to do that. Didn't attract me, and therefore I began with philosophy and history and so on. And this is part of me, of course. And after my study in Berlin, I had the great luck to get a job at the Southwest radio station. This is a station in, perhaps you know, in Germany we have not only one radio station like the BBC, but we have that's a result of the situation after the World War. We have radio stations in every region, Bavarian, northern of Germany, and so on. And the radio station where I was working in the southwest, it's very near to the frontier to France, was special. We have a very fine orchestra. It's very brave, and it's also famous. One of the composers, I digress a little bit. One of the composers in exile during the fascist time, the third government came back to Germany first to perform music as conductors with our orchestra. This was a special thing. And we, from the beginning, the Southwest Radio had this festival, Donaueschingen Musiktage. If you come to Germany, it's always in October. In the middle of October, you have to go there. Absolutely, it's I don't know. I don't think there are many festivals with a possibility for first performance of orchestral works. And we have an orchestra. This is absolutely used to do everything on their instruments composers want to have performed. And also they have sound installations, and we have chamber music and very many things with the experimental studio in Freiburg, or how this is called in Paris from Boulez is this big studio, perhaps you know. This is a combination or interdependence of electronic and instruments. To study this, I can only recommend to study the late electroacoustic chamber work of Nono. It's there you have all the very subtle things, handling with space, handling with the colors and timbres of instruments, and interacting of live electronic and an instrument. Is this, or does it?
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, yeah, definitely.
Yes, you asked my intention.
Yeah,
No,
I'm curious. I think that's the one part.
Caring of the audience is not the first point. Of course not. In the beginning, I have an idea, and of course, I express myself. Perhaps you know the feeling when first my works were performed. I had the feeling of staying naked on the stage. It's you give your soul, and of course it's a mixture of craft and knowledge over the instruments and so on, and of my intentions. I tried to say this to this work Zeitenlöcher. We faded it out with the soprano, but carrying to the audience, no, couldn't be the way. Afterwards, of course, I have to look. Sometimes I got scores from composers who hadn't reflect how to perform, and then you have every bar another metrum, 3/3, no, it's not 3/4, or 2/2, and so on, and every moment changing. You can't perform this, and I thought there's missing a last layer of work to write a score that can be performed, and there's nothing between the musicians and my musical intention. This is the point.